Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Late Friday night, but some massive news for the South Carolina fans coming out of the recruiting trail as four-star offensive lineman Shedrick Sarratt Jr. committing to South Carolina. And I don't need to be the one to tell South Carolina fans that this is a massive get for South Carolina in this 2025 Class 1, one of the top players in the state of South Carolina. But I think more importantly for South Carolina fans, recruiting the offensive line needs to be a priority for Shane Beamer and this South Carolina staff. You take a look back at 2023, there were a lot of good aspects of that South Carolina team. Spencer Rattler, in my mind, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Xavier Legette, one of the better wide receivers in the SEC. But when you have an offensive line that struggled as much as South Carolina's did, it is really hard to win games in the SEC. And why it is important to get these bodies out of the high school ranks is South Carolina learned it the hard way in 2023. It is very difficult to address the offensive line in the transfer portal. So it makes it a priority and kind of a must if you're a team in the SEC to recruit the offensive line out of the high school level. And you take a look at what South Carolina is doing on the recruiting trail with the offensive line. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic about where this offensive line is going. You take a look back at the last couple of classes. I mean, in the 2024 cycle, Cam Pringle, Josiah Thompson, two guys that I am extremely high on coming in as true freshmen. But then you take a look at the guys that are going into year two for South Carolina, Tree, a guy like Marquis Anderson, Trevon Baugh. You kind of look at South Carolina and say, you feel pretty good about where this offensive line is going in terms of the young talent that they're getting within this program. And a guy like Shedrick Sarratt Jr. in the 2025 class, certainly a massive get for South Carolina. Want to get into Shedrick Sarratt, who's a very interesting film study to talk about. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And y'all know I love talking the recruiting trail, and a Friday night in the middle of the summer for whoever's checking this out, that stuff means the world to me. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Shedrick Sarratt Jr. And I think what you really like at first is this is a 6'4", 300-pound frame that has a basketball background, and you see the basketball background show up on the high school football field. Really, really good footwork, knows how to be an athlete in pass protection. And then in the run blocking department, a guy that operates really well in space. I think another thing that I like about Shedrick Sarratt Jr.'s game is I think there's some versatility here. I think he certainly is an athlete and athletic enough to play the offensive tackle spot in the SEC. But this is also a guy that when you take a look at him in a phone booth, when he has hands on opposing defensive linemen, there's some big-time power to this kid. And why I say that is I think he could be a damn good guard as well. And you talk about building a deep offensive line, having guys that give you that versatility where you can play him at tackle, you can kick him in the guard, he can be serviceable and damn good at both of those positions. That's massive in terms of building the depth on the offensive line. Shedrick Sarratt Jr., I think, gives South Carolina that kind of aspect in this 2025 cycle. And you get into the film, this kid's a fun film study to watch because, again, 6'4", 300 pounds, you can tell this is one of the more physically imposing tackles that you see in this 2025 class. Very, very very, very good get off, I should say, off the line of scrimmage. And when he is engaged with opposing defenders, I mean, he's normally winning a lot of these reps, playing that left tackle spot. I mean, getting engaged and just railroading. And that is something that you definitely want to see at the high school level. I need the next couple of reps, you're going to see really, really impressive in pass protection too. And you kind of see the basketball background to his game. Very, very good footwork, big time power in the upper body. This is how you want your tackles to look in pass protection, using length, getting hands on opposing defensive linemen. You see a little nasty to finish out that play as well. It's rare to see high school offensive tackles show the chops in pass protection. It's all over Shedrick Sarratt Jr.'s film. And again, when you ask him to get downhill and kind of move bodies off the line of scrimmage, he is certainly an offensive tackle that can do that as well. So you're off the line of scrimmage. He finishes his blocks at a high level. You see a little double team there. Just, I mean, consistently putting people into the dirt. And if you're a South Carolina fan, we need more of these kind of bodies for South Carolina. And you take a look at what South Carolina is doing in this 2025 class, and I think there's a lot to be excited for, right? You take a look at top 25 class in the country now. Shamari Earls is an interesting one. He's taken a visit to Michigan. I think he has another visit lined up for Georgia. This is an elite caliber cornerback that you want to keep in this 2025 class, but you start scrolling down and say, all right, Shane Beamer is starting to get going in this 2025 cycle. They landed another commitment earlier today that we didn't talk about, but AJ Holloway coming from Buford, Georgia. And I'll say this, Buford down in Georgia, for those who don't follow the high school recruiting trail and for the high school football landscape, that's one of the best programs that you see in the country. If you can get guys from Buford, Georgia coming up to play at South Carolina, that is certainly a high school that you want to attack on the train or in the recruiting trail. Like what Shane Beamer's doing, we'll continue to see what he does throughout the next couple of weeks, really in it for a couple top prospects in this 2025 class. And that's one thing that does excite you, is you kind of feel like Shane Beamer has the culture going in the right spot. Even though they didn't win a ton of football games in 2023, you can tell people within this program, they believe what South Carolina is doing and where they are going. But I think more importantly, you're also seeing that talent come to South Carolina as well. A couple back-to-back top 25 classes, hopefully trending for a third top 25 class. We'll continue to keep you guys as updated as possible with what South Carolina is doing on the recruiting trail. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.